All right, I call this meeting of the special meeting of the Borough Council, Madison Borough Council to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, justice. We have the Statement in Compliance Open Public Meetings Act.
In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting, the council was provided by transmitting a copy of the meeting notice to the Madison Eagle and the Morris County Daily Record, posting a copy on the bulletin board at the main entrance to Borough Hall, and filing a copy in the office of the clerk, all on November 9th, 2020. Copies of said notice were made available to members of the general public.
And roll call, please.
Mayor Conley,
Here.
Mrs. Vitale. She's here. We're all muted.
She is here.
Yes.
I'm here. I'm here.
Bailey,
Here.
Ms. Byrne is here. Mr. Hoover,
Yes, here.
Ms. Cohen,
Here.
Ms. Ehrlich.
Here.
Hey, welcome all. And special meeting, and apologize. We initially had announced it for Wednesday, had to move it to tonight to keep in sequence with planning board meetings. So I appreciate the patience of the public and understanding. Purpose of tonight's meeting is to go over how Madison will meet its legal obligation to provide affordable housing. You have already heard over the past year the ongoing negotiations and working towards a settlement, and it was already announced that we are will be doing a 40-unit affordable housing complex. So we will be talking about the location and how that will be done. What we won't be talking about is the design or layout at this point. That will come at a later date. But there'll be plenty of time for the public to provide input towards the look and the design of the project. So again, this is about the location, but not the construction at this point. Just to give a quick little background on we all know, or most of us know, Madison has a long history of meeting the need for affordable housing. In fact, we just celebrated a couple weeks ago the 50th anniversary of the Madison Housing Authority. We were the first suburban community in New Jersey to have a housing authority, and there's still only a handful. So Madison is to be recognized for its effort in this area. Our leaders saw that challenge 50 years ago, and that challenge has only grown and even more difficult, especially in the North Jersey area. So how this meeting will flow through so the public understands. We will be hearing shortly from a current tenant and a former tenant of affordable housing, so you can get a feel for who the housing serves and the impact it makes in lives. We will then hand it off to our planner, Dr. Susan Bixstein, who will take us through the background on how we got here, talk about the obligation, how that was calculated, and how we will meet this obligation. As has been notified to the neighborhoods, and also has been put out already over the past week, is that the location we are talking about is on Walnut Street at the site of the Civic Center, and also the half-acre lot that was transferred over to the borough from the Board of Education with frontage on Community Place. So there'll be two separate projects, one on Walnut Street and one on Community Place. You'll be hearing a little bit more about that shortly. You'll also hear that this is much different than what was proposed for Walnut Street before, and you'll hear why we ended up at this location once again, in a way. There will be, since it is going at the Civic Center site, Ray Cody will discuss the plan to relocate the current programs, the senior programs, and our health department in particular. There are also partner agencies that have been notified of the move, and they will have time to find new homes if necessary. There will be a time for public comment and questions, and then there will be a vote on a redevelopment resolution at the end of the meeting. That is our layout. And Michael, if we could promote Dion Ishi. We'll bring on Dion James first as we bring her up. I don't want to steal her thunder, but just a quick story about Dion and truly the impact of affordable housing. She's a multi-generational, multi-generation family. Her grandmother was hired by my mother to help raise the 11 Conley children. So it is a long time tradition that Dion and I have. So with that, Dion, want to please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit what this has meant to you.
Great. Thank you, Bob. As a matter of fact, there's my grandmother right there. Hanging up.
Okay.
We're always close to me.
Yes.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Dion James. As Bob said earlier, my grandmother was his nanny. He also took care of me at Dodge Field during summers. He was my camp counselor along with a multitude of my cousins. And I also worked for Bob Conley at the Madison area YMCA. So we have a long history, and most of you probably don't know my last name of James, but you probably know my family. If you know Sally's, Evans, Spencer's, Miles, those were all my family. My dad is the oldest Sally child, and my mother was in the middle, close towards the oldest Evans child, who lived on Elmer Street and Central Avenue. So about 5 years ago, my brother and my son, whom we all lived together for numerous years, were wrongfully evicted from our house. We were living in an apartment in Morristown, and at that time, we were essentially had no place to go. It happened to be that my best friend was married to one of my cousins. They took us in, and we lived there for about a year. Me and my son shared a 1-bedroom, and my brother lived in the basement. Not ideal, but at the time, that was all we had. We were homeless, essentially. So that's where we lived. And needless to say, I'm guessing, not saying we wore out our welcome, but we were asked to leave, which, it went from there are 3 people in their house to 6 people in Mount Tabor. So we were asked to leave. Not ideal again. So once again, we were homeless. We were desperate. And then at the bewitching hour, we got the phone call from Tanya, and she said our name was next on the waiting list for housing. We began the long process of interviews and paperwork to get our unit on Lewanaco Way. During one of the interviews, Tanya had asked me if I were to give you and your son a unit and your brother a voucher to move out, would that work? I thought about it for a while. Needless to say, I said it would work, but it would be very difficult. Me and my brother are only a year apart. We've always lived together everywhere we've been. And even when I got pregnant, we were living together. And that was my son's uncle. So we had always lived together, and he was with him the first 5 years of his life. So I'm like, we could do it, not ideal. And somewhere within the interview, I guess I began to cry because this was our family. This was our makeup. So to ask me and my son to be together and leave my brother out, once again, not ideal. But if that was a decision I would have to make, I would have to take me and my son. So Tanya mentioned to me, she was taken aback, and Bob knows me, and that's just not something in my nature. I'm from a strong line of women in my family, and we just don't cry. But I guess I was just taken aback and thought about it, and I was like, I got to do what's best for us. So Tanya said to me, she was like, you know what? She was like, I appreciate it. She said, I'm not saying that your crying is the best thing. She said, but most people don't come in with their raw emotions at that point and say how much they needed this place to live. And I had told her, I said, this was it. We were at our wits' end. We were going to be homeless. If we didn't get this place, that was going to be it. We would have to figure out what we were going to do. At that point, she said, you know what? She said, thank you. And she said, we're going to give you this unit. She said, it's just what it is. We're going to give you the 3-bedroom. Your brother, you, your son, you're going to be together. We were so very excited. Now we had 3 bedrooms. We went from me and him sharing a bedroom and my brother living in the basement to each of us having our own bedroom, which was phenomenal. And now we were in a stable place, not having to worry about having to move out, not having to make all different types of rent payments, because now we were on a fixed budget because we had the same amount of rent every single month. So we were able to pay our utilities. We were able to do everything. And we're hoping that the unit we were going to be in, we're not going to have to leave again until we make the next move of purchasing a house, which comes full circle to, since I've lived in this unit, me, my brother, and my son, I've also graduated college with my BS in psychology in, I guess, in August. Now I'm working on my master's in social work, and a lot of that decision has to do with the housing I was able to be in, and also how Madison has pretty much showed us, you know, it's not just, I'm going to give you a handout. We're in the FSS program, which shows you how to budget. You go to meetings, you go to trainings. They take a portion of your money and they put it aside and they show you how to budget it so that you can make the next big purchase of buying a house, which is great. And this is my community. I grew up here and I'm hoping not to leave, especially with all the new things going on. I'm hoping to stay here and being able to buy one of the new houses. I'm crossing my fingers because my son, all he's known is Madison. All we've known is Madison. This is where we grew up. And I'm hoping that this will be his lifelong place to live. And he will grow up in this lovely community with all of this exceptional everything. That's all I can say. Everything is exceptional. That's about it. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you so much, Dion. I know it's not easy, but we appreciate you sharing your story, and it's so great to have you back into Madison to be part of our community once again. And for another story, we have Yeshi, who will share the story of her family and her mother and the impact that affordable housing has had.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, Mayor Conley, and I'd like to also say great job again, Dion. We both spoke at the 50th anniversary for Madison Housing, and ties run deep in Madison because she was also a camp counselor of mine growing up in Kirby, so it's always good to see you. My name is Yeshi Mitaku. My mother and I were residents of the Madison Housing Authority for many years. My mother raised me on her own and provided me with an upbringing in Madison, a town so scenic, John Hughes would tip his hat. I grew up playing at Dodge Park, grabbing ice cream at McCool's, bundling up to battle the chilly fall weather on Bottle Hill Day. But underlying these nostalgic memories, however, was a very real and pertinent fact. Poverty is not for the faint of heart, especially when your immediate environment reflects everything you cannot quite obtain. Luckily, my mother was never lacking in strength. She emigrated to this country younger than I am now, with hopes of achieving her slice of the American dream. Her quiet resilience and profound empathy led her to a career in childcare right here in Madison. That is where she first learned of the Madison Housing Authority and what would be her first step towards more autonomy and security. When I asked my mom how she first connected with the Housing Authority, she paints a vivid picture of her in a sectioned off phone booth, tightly grasping the telephone in one hand and a scrap of paper with a phone number in the other, each ring feeling excruciatingly long. My mom must have rocked the interview because within a few months, we moved into our privately owned apartment in town with the help of a Section 8 rental assistance program. And then a little over a year after, we were offered public housing, an apartment on Park Ave, the place we called home for about 20 years. I basically grew up in public housing. Many birthdays were celebrated, plenty of late nights doing homework that resulted in the inevitable scolding the next morning, countless home-cooked meals from my mom after a long day at work, something I would not fully appreciate until I left for college. Family gatherings with extended family and friends, and so on and so forth. There is an indescribable beauty in progress. Furthermore, how the function of progress demands an innate understanding that complacency is no comparison to ambition. It implores you to leverage your achievements for your ambitions. Having interned at the Housing Authority here in Madison during my years at Rutgers, I was lucky enough to see the dedication of the staff who have kept all of this just thriving. Tanya, Lou, all the sorts. It was an honor to have learned more about one of the nation's most successful small housing authorities. Meanwhile, my mom became a participant in the Housing Authority's Family Self-Sufficiency Program and learned about the NJ Housing Partnership, which turned out to be life-saving. Remember when I said my mom was one of quiet and undeniable resilience? Despite her years of working multiple minimum wage jobs, raising a daughter on her own, never owning a car that wasn't over 10 years old, she prayed and envisioned the day that she would have a home of her own. Well, God didn't let those dreams go to waste. With credit to him and the excellent team at Madison Housing Authority and the Housing Partnership, we moved into our own home last fall. My mom and I wake up every day marveling at a reality that we thought never could be. My mom has fought tirelessly to acquire her sliver of the American dream, and there are no words to accurately communicate the admiration and pride I feel reflecting on her journey. It is because of witnessing my mom's struggles that I am so passionate about seeing other low-income families achieve their dreams and their goals, and to fully free themselves from the stigma and internalized prejudices that come along with being poor. I suppose that's why I'm currently enrolled in the Master of Science in Public and Urban Policy at the New School, studying the very policies that either systemically marginalize or uplift low-income communities. One thing I know, however, is that if housing authorities around the nation take a cue from our incredible team here in Madison, we'll be on the right path. Thank you so much.
Chief, thank you so much, and again, give your best to your mother, and again, congratulations on her owning a home. Dion, thank you also for carving out time to do this. I think it really is helpful for everyone to put a face and stories to what we try to accomplish, not just in Madison, but in towns across this country with affordable housing. So we will now move on to Dr. Susan Blickstein, and sorry you have a tough act to follow as we segue into the presentation of how we got into this point in settlement and our next steps. So Susan.
Okay, hang on, I'm going to get my share screen going here. Can everybody see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to jump right in because when you have a hard act to follow, I find that is the best strategy. So I'm going to jump right in and hope that this gives a solid update and a little bit more kind of background and knowledge for people to understand the various components of the borough's obligation, how the court process has required the borough to act and within what timeframes, and to show you all of the borough's affordable housing supply, existing, approved, and the strategies that have been implemented and will be implemented to address the borough's obligation. I do want to say that my partner in crime, that's kind of a really bad term, who has worked with me on this project. Elizabeth McManus is not here tonight, but we have worked as a team through this process. And I want to acknowledge the members of the Affordable Housing Committee who gave very important feedback and direction and input, and several of whom spent many, many hours in court throughout this process. So just big picture. In New Jersey, all communities that are seeking to participate in affordable housing are in or have been in litigation. And at the most basic level, while this is technically a voluntary process, communities are heavily incentivized to participate. And what I mean by that is that for communities that do not participate, there is no immunity from litigation that developers can file to locate affordable housing at a scale, design, intensity that they feel is appropriate and addresses the borough's obligation. So a developer can be awarded a higher density development via litigation. And even then, after such litigation, municipalities are required to meet the requirements of the court process in any case. So there's this feedback loop. And in essence, that means that either directly or indirectly, New Jersey communities are in the same process. And that process, what all towns are participating in, started a while back by filing for a declaratory judgment, which is a fancy way of alerting the court that a municipality seeks to participate in the litigation process. Communities then are seeking a settlement agreement. Fair Share Housing Center is an interested party in every litigation for every community in New Jersey. And a settlement agreement has to be approved by the court, negotiated with the Fair Share Housing Center, and approved by the municipal governing body. There is a fairness hearing or a trial that addresses whether the settlement agreement is fair to low and moderate income households. That is the focus of the fairness criteria. And then a compliance hearing in which the court approves adopting housing plan, implementing ordinances and resolutions, all of the details that are necessary to implement what has been agreed upon by the parties. So what's in the settlement agreement? If you are home and you can go make a very strong cup of tea or espresso at this point, as I go through a little bit of the nitty gritty, but I'm going to try to keep it at a high altitude. There are basically three components of each municipality's obligation that are addressed in a settlement agreement. They have they're referred to as prior round, current round, and present need or rehabilitation. I'm going to explain those in a moment. There are specific compliance strategies that are addressed in the settlement agreement. In the case of Madison, this includes a vacant land adjustment. I'm going to explain what that is, and specific affordable housing sites and strategies. The third thing is the administration of all of the strategies and programs that are agreed upon. This requires monitoring the administration of existing and future affordable housing units and next steps. So Madison's obligation. I mentioned it's comprised of essentially three buckets: rehabilitation, which are rental units that can be rehabilitated; the prior round or the previous period obligation, which in Madison's case was 86 units; And what we are referring to as the third or current round, which runs from 1999 to 2025. Madison has an obligation of 500 units based on prior court determinations. And then these three pieces are also impacted by the vacant land adjustment, or what's called a realistic development potential. Communities that are built out like Madison are granted an opportunity to analyze their vacant land and to determine realistically how much residential development could occur, and therefore, as a component of that, how much affordable housing could be accommodated. In Madison's case, this obligation is 147 units, and these 147 units are addressed through existing and new construction obligations. And again, I'll address those in more detail in a moment. So the rehabilitation obligation, this can be met by participating in the county's rehabilitation program, by operating a municipal rental rehabilitation program, or through the potential to reduce the obligation. One of the things that the settlement agreement for Madison provides for is the option to complete what's called a structural conditions survey, which is a windshield survey of rental units within the community that illustrates that there aren't sufficient rental units in need of rehabilitation, and therefore the borough would be eligible for a reduction in this obligation. The next piece is the prior round obligation. The good news for Madison, and with the history of affordable housing here that we have heard earlier this evening, is this is fully satisfied with existing affordable housing units. Those units are located throughout the borough, on Community Place, Park Avenue, John Avenue, Belmont Avenue, Cook Avenue, 80 Park Avenue, Rexford Tucker Apartments, 30 Lewanika Way. So they are scattered throughout the borough. The current or third round obligation, this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. The borough was assigned a 500 unit obligation, which through the analysis of vacant land was adjusted downward to 147 units. The remaining obligation, the delta between 500 and the 147 realistic development potential, or RDP, is referred to as unmet need. In Madison's case, the unmet need is met in two ways. The borough is fortunate because of its current affordable housing supply to have surplus credits that can be applied towards that number, and has also adopted zoning overlays and zoning changes to address the balance. It is recognized that a built-out community will not fully meet the hard number. And that is the importance and the value of going through the vacant land adjustment process and agreeing to adopt optional zoning strategies in place of providing, which in this case would be a delta of over still 250 some odd units of affordable housing. So it's a significant benefit that the borough was able to undertake this analysis and have the court agree to it. So in addressing the third round, or the RDP of 147 units, the current settlement agreement and the approach has been to maximize the use of existing credits. This includes the surplus prior round credits that have been constructed, as well as some smaller number of units that have been approved very recently. This also includes a rezoning of the Madison Mall apartments, and I will explain that in greater detail in a moment. And the borough's ability to negotiate additional time to identify a site or sites for its 100% affordable component agreed to in the settlement agreement, which is for 40 units, as the mayor indicated. I want to say that I'm not aware of any other community that was granted additional time and that fought so hard to have the additional time to evaluate options. The settlement agreement does, however, have a very strict timeline and very strict consequences with that timeline. The borough is obligated to identify and acquire a site it can control by December 1st. And as many of you will recall, there was an effort previously to complete a diversion of open space land at the MRC for about 1.5 acres that ended up being subject to state jurisdiction, which was not known at the time that that effort was initiated. The state process is a lengthy one and does not even come close to meshing with that December 1st deadline. The borough also sought to acquire another property, but was not able to acquire it within the timeline dictated in the settlement agreement. So what are the consequences to the borough for not complying with this component of the settlement agreement? If Madison doesn't submit proof by December 1st, 2020, that it has acquired or obtained a realistic site for the 40-unit, 100% affordable development, then its immunity from builders' remedy zoning suits will immediately terminate, and any developer would be entitled to bring suit in order to meet the borough's obligation. The settlement agreement further goes on to indicate that somebody appointed by the court would be given the authority to identify site or sites, that the borough would be required to purchase or obtain, including through the use of eminent domain, if necessary, to address the 40-unit, 100% affordable development obligation. So that's a very strict timeline and a very strict consequences. So I want to talk a little bit about the borough's affordable housing strategies. I indicated when speaking about the prior round obligation of 86 units that the existing supply is scattered throughout the borough. I'm going to show a map in a moment or two that illustrates that. The borough has adopted overlay zones as well as part of that unmet need strategy. And an overlay zone is a zoning option. It is not a requirement. And I want to be really clear about that. The borough also adopted zoning amendments in a few areas that already permit either mixed use or multifamily development. And I'll go over those in more detail. And I do want to indicate that all but approximately 50 units of that 147 unit RDP are already accounted for via existing development and approved units. So the borough has done a good job with its housing program. So I want to show this map and give a little context for it. It may be a little bit hard to see for some of you, but the blue dots are letters, and the letters refer to specific existing affordable housing developments within the community. So those are the dark blue dots that you can see at various locations, all the way to the south, west, east, north of the borough. In pink, there are numbers. The pink circles represent numbers showing the overlay zoning strategies and the zoning strategies that the borough's implemented. And so they are along the central spine of the borough, but not exclusively, also in the west and also to the eastern border with Chatham Borough. So this is the existing supply and those future strategies. I also want to point out that the borough has what's called a borough-wide set-aside ordinance. A set-aside ordinance requires that a certain percentage of all new housing proposed with at least 5 units at a density of at least 6 dwelling units per acre provide 20% of those units as affordable to low and moderate income families. And the borough has had this ordinance in place for several years. Some of that 147 unit obligation is being addressed through units that were created through the ordinance. I want to give a little bit of overview on the locations of the overlay zones and zoning strategies. I mentioned that these are zoning options. There are 4 nodes on Park Avenue and Main Street that are located in the community commercial district. The first is on Park Avenue at the intersection with Loveland Street. The second is on the south side of Main Street between Cross and Sampson. The third is the south side of Main Street between Bruns and Seaman. And the fourth is on Main Street, essentially running from the Madison Junior School to Cross Street. What this does is provide an option in addition to the CC zoning in place. And that CC zoning now and historically has allowed mixed use development, ground floor commercial with upper floor apartments. This eliminates the need to do ground floor commercial and makes it possible to do a 3-story multifamily inclusionary development in these identified nodes. There are maps here showing these locations. The upper left area outlined in red is the area between Sampson Avenue and Cross Street with J&M in the center of it. The upper right shows the south side of Main Street between Seaman Street and Bruns Street. The lower right shows the intersection of Park Avenue with Loveland Street. And the lower left shows Staples Plaza. These are all located within these nodes that provide an additional option. In addition to those nodes, there have been some zoning modifications outside of those areas. There is a new option in the CBD2 district, which essentially covers Cook Avenue and Elmer Street. I'll show a map in a moment. That would allow for 3-story multifamily inclusionary residential use. This zoning district currently allows mixed use, similar to the CC district. It allows a ground floor commercial with 2 stories of housing above. The strategy that the borough took in this regard was to try to emphasize this area more for residential use, for downtown living, to try to support the retail core of the community. And so that option is now in place. There's also an inclusionary option, a very similar one to what I just described, at the corner of Park and Ridgedale Avenues. And there is an incentive for that particular property to preserve historic barns. There is an overlay option on Park Avenue on the south side between James Park and Elm Street. I'll show that map in a moment as well as an overlay option on the New Life Fellowship Church property at the intersection of Green Avenue and Shunpike Road, as well as a refinement to the gateway districts. And the gateway districts are essentially the first block from Chatham Borough, is zoned Gateway 1 and 2. So in this map, you can see that the top left is showing the corner of Ridgedale and Park Avenues. The top right is showing the R4 district on Park Avenue, roughly from James Park to Elm Street, that is in an overlay district. The bottom left is showing the New Life Fellowship Church parcel, and the bottom right is showing the CC district that encompasses Elmer Street, Cook Street, and part of Green Avenue. The Gateway 1 and 2 districts that I mentioned on the lower right, you can see that these are located essentially from Brook Lake and Division Avenue to Niles Avenue. I want to point out that previously this district permitted only age-restricted and senior housing. And I want to emphasize that the borough has reached a cap, its maximum allowable number of units that can count towards its obligation that are age-restricted units. And that cap is set out in the Council on Affordable Housing rules that have governed the litigation process and the settlement process. So in this instance, the borough simply removed the age restriction and allows multifamily development without the age restriction. I mentioned earlier that Madison Mall Apartments is one site that is being, let's say this, Madison Mall Apartments is addressing the realistic development potential of the borough. This area is the green lawn that sits between Staples Plaza and the Jaguar dealer, with apartments behind it. It is about 1.25 acres. There are 64 existing garden apartment units that sit behind this vacant area. And this area has been rezoned to allow up to 40 new units with the equivalent of a 25% affordable set aside. What this does is create the ability for 10 affordable units without any cost to the borough. The balance of the RDP, as I mentioned, has to be addressed via a municipally sponsored 40-unit project. Cannot be age restricted, but there is a potential for 50% of the units to have a veteran's preference, which is something that the committee has talked about and the borough has been interested in including. I want to emphasize, what does affordable mean in this sense? What it means for the 100% municipally sponsored project is that households that fall within the 40 to 70% of median household income would qualify. That's the band for qualification, with most of the units would be allocated by virtue of number of bedrooms, by the size of those units, for households earning around $57,000 per year, which is 60% of the median household income. The Civic Center property, I'm sure many of you will recall the prior concept that included 40 units. It included borough offices and a senior center. The current approach is quite different. What is being envisioned is no more than 30 units at this location, with the borough offices, the senior center, other tenants and users to be relocated with ample lead time. This results in a smaller footprint, less traffic, the ability for a more context-sensitive approach with the design, with townhouse style units. And importantly, there is a locational advantage. Being in the center of the community in a location that is transit-oriented allows for a higher score in competing for low-income tax credit financing, which is a significant benefit for the borough. It's also a benefit for future families and residents who don't need to rely on automobiles for all transportation. These are images. This is not, none of these are the actual design, but I wanted to give a visual of what a 2.5 to 3 story scale might look like in a townhouse style approach. With the potential for rear-loaded garages with some great differential potentially. So there are a lot of different ways that townhouses can be designed now. And I think that this kind of unit is an improvement in terms of the neighborhood and the streetscape than the prior 40-unit concept. As the mayor mentioned, Community Place on a little over 1/2 acre acquired from the Board of Education, 14 units can be located based on the terms of that acquisition. The access to these units would be from Community Place. They would not flow through onto Walnut Street, but they would be considered part of the same development for purposes of seeking low-income housing tax credit financing and have the same advantage in terms of location for competitive scoring for that financing. Significantly important, this parcel is borough owned. There is no need to acquire land from private entities in order to develop it. I want to address for a moment some typical concerns about affordable housing and really focus on some research on smaller scale projects such as what's proposed here. And the research indicates that they have virtually no impact on surrounding property values if they are well designed and well managed. One of the things I want to point out is that the New Jersey Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency that runs the low-income housing tax credit program for the state has very strict criteria for affordable housing developers. Those developers are experts at managing and administering their projects, and they will be well-designed and well-managed. The other thing I want to note is that without 100% affordable housing for those 40 units, the borough would be looking at 200 or more units to generate the same number of units, with much less control over the management of those units, the design, and other details associated with them. Cranford Borough, for instance, they were hit with a builder's remedy suit, and they ended up with around 250 units to address an obligation of a similar size to Madison's. So that's an important thing to keep in mind in terms of the big picture and the specific approach here. The borough will be embarking on an RFQ for a redevelopment process. This is also important because it allows the borough to emphasize design, to control the number and types of units, and also to consider the expertise of developers, not only with affordable housing, but also with green building design. So it's an important strategy that the borough, I think, is wisely putting into place and starting that process. I'll also note that the borough does have resources in its Affordable Housing Trust Fund that can be allocated to the future project as well. So this map shows all the strategies that were previously shown, but adds in the Walnut Street and Central Avenue Community Place now parcels, and they're in the center there. So this is the current supply, future 100% affordable locations, as well as the overlay options that I have described. And the next steps that the borough has to look forward to is undertaking a redevelopment investigation for the Community Place parcel, which, as I mentioned previously, the borough owns the property. There's no need to use eminent domain to acquire it. The borough, using the redevelopment statute, will issue an RFQ and select a redeveloper. The borough will also adopt its updated housing plan consistent with the settlement agreement that the court has approved, as well as a redevelopment plan for the Community Place parcel. There is a redevelopment plan already in place for the Civic Center that is fairly flexible and that can accommodate the kind of visual image and townhouse style approach that I showed earlier. The borough's compliance hearing will be in February of next year. Financing and design will occur after that through late next year, with construction not anticipated until late 2022. So obviously this is not happening overnight. It's a long and very detailed process to put all the pieces into place. And I think I will stop there and hand the mantle back to the mayor.
Very much, Susan. I know for everyone listening in, this is a lot of information, and we appreciate the depth you've got into it, because it all needs to be shared so people can hopefully understand it. I know some people are probably more familiar with the phrase RFP, which is request for proposal. This RFQ is request for qualifications, and so it is not necessarily based on the actual project, but the experience that a developer would bring to the table. Just so I know there's a lot of things that from RDP to RFQ and so on that may have people trying to understand the presentation, but again, very important. This will be placed on RoseNet tomorrow, so you can go back and get and kind of look at it your own rate. What I'd like to do right now is open it up to the council for any questions or comments for Susan. We'll leave the presentation there for a little bit longer, just in case anyone needs to go back to the slide. Any? All right, yeah, Ostry and then Rachel.
Got it. I want to thank Susan and Beth and the whole team for putting this together, because we really, for 5 years now, we have been working with the legal system and the courts to do what's right for Madison. And without their expertise and guidance here, I don't think we would have ended up where we did today, which is a pretty good result. So thank you very much.
Well said. Thank you. Rachel and then Carmela.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Susan. That was a terrific presentation. Even though many of us have been through this many times, I feel like repetition is required to grasp all the nuances of this, and your slow and deliberate way of taking us through it is so helpful. I appreciate it. Can you explain why, if the borough already controls the community place parcel, why we need to pursue a redevelopment status or agreement for that?
What the redevelopment agreement, redevelopment process allows the borough to do is to create a redevelopment plan. And that redevelopment plan can very specifically guide the type and scale and height and all the development parameters in great detail. It can guide things that are not legally possible to do through conventional zoning. And so it gives the borough an additional measure, I think, over control and the quality of the project, which is very, very important. It also allows the borough to select a redeveloper based on specific criteria, which is also very important.
And Carmela?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor.
And then Deb.
I just want to say, thank you to Susan and Beth and of course to Pat and Ostry and Ray and everybody who has sat through all of these court cases and whatever. It's been kind of a stressful kind of 5 years. But our professional team has really made it a lot easier for us to understand. There's a lot of information here. And I don't know, when you're first listening to this, if you can actually absorb all of it, because it takes a long time, doesn't it, Susan? To get it, the RDP and the, vacant land and whatever. And you feel very successful when you finally understand what those things are. But, and I also want to say, thank you to the mayor for inviting those two lovely ladies today. A couple of weeks ago, as the mayor said, we had our 50th anniversary and for Madison Housing. And these were two absolutely wonderful success stories. because it gave people who were born and raised here the opportunity to live in Madison. So I just think the success stories that come out of this are extremely important. I remember after we built the 5 units up on Elm Street, and they were for sale units. And I remember very clearly one of the young girls who was a single mom raising 2 kids, had purchased one of those units, and she called up Madison Housing, and it was a big party almost, to say that she was able to sell it. She was getting married. She had finished her degree in college and whatever, and she was moving on to a very happy life. Those are one success stories after the other. And I think that's kind of what we forget about the leg up for people who need affordable housing. And so I think that this showed tonight what we have to do legally, but I think it also shows that morally, you know, we have an opportunity to continue to help people like these 2 young ladies that spoke tonight. So thank you, Susan. Tell Beth thank you. And to all you guys that have been working and sitting and listening to the attorneys and the judge and whatever, you know, my thanks for doing all of that. Appreciate it.
Right, Deb and Don, your video is off, so in case you're raising your hand, I won't be able to see you.
My thanks as well as somebody who came in smack in the middle of it and was trying to understand all these different terms, whether it was Susan or Beth or Ray or whomever that would sit with me on the phone at, you know, in Hartley Dodge. That is much appreciated. But I think for me, the striking thing is I did not realize what Madison had for affordable housing until I was asked to run for council and chose to run for council. And as we canvassed the entire town, it would be pointed out to me, this is where some of our affordable housing is. And I would look at it and go, where? So I think Madison has done a great job. And while those images that Susan put up have nothing to do with what the final thing may look like, they were just kind of a, hey, here are some options. I think it's nice to remember that you don't know that affordable housing is around and that they just, those people just blend in. Their houses blend in, their rental units blend in, they blend in. You wouldn't know one way or the other who they are. And I think that's important as we're thinking about, and we've already all talked about the, you know, the design is we have to make sure it maintains the Madison look, which may not be the best way to say that, but you know, it just kind of blends into what's already in Madison.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, Susan, if you can, I'd love to have you stay on board and when we get to public, in case there's questions that may come up. Thanks again, as said by our council members, excellent job. That's, as I pointed out in one of our meetings, it's not only do we have a great planner, but a planner that's also a professor that is able to relay the everything we need to know. And again, to reminder the public that there'll be a public comment after our next agenda item. And so that'll be coming up shortly. But at this point, I want to move on to the senior program and health department relocation and bring on Ray Cody.
Hi, Mayor. The main building at the Civic Center has been vacant other than the Board of Health due to the pandemic since March of this year. So for the last 8 months, the building has basically only been occupied by the Board of Health. In addition to the Board of Health, the prior tenants were the Senior Center and the Adult School in the main building and Project Community Pride run by the YMCA in the front building. All of the external leases, which would basically be the Adult School and Project Community Pride, were on very favorable terms, with the tenants paying $1 a year in rent and the borough paying the utilities and maintenance. And even though the Civic Center property has been identified tonight as one of the possible affordable housing sites, nothing will change on site for at least a year or longer, which reinforces what Susan said earlier in his presentation. The borough will be applying to the State Housing Mortgage and Finance Agency for an allocation of low-income housing tax credits to fund the development. Those applications are very complicated and will be due in August of 2021. So we're talking about months from now. And the state will, after a review period, will announce the tax credit awards in the November-December 2021 timeframe. Final design work will then commence, if we're approved, in January of 2022, with construction projected to start in June of 2022. So we're talking about significant period of time. In the event the borough is not successful in securing the tax credits, the entire process would repeat for the following year, resulting with a similar schedule with the construction to start in June of 2023. So we're talking 3 years from now before there would be a shovel in the ground potentially. During this entire protracted period, the external tenants have been notified by the borough that they can remain in place on the same terms, $1 a year with us paying the utilities and operating costs, but that they should start now to explore alternate space options with their other government partners, funders, supporters, and stakeholders. But they'll have adequate time to plan for that, to have a multi-month, multi-year period to plan for this transition. All of this is obviously subject to a dramatic improvement in the pandemic environment to allow safe occupancy of the building. The administration is currently exploring multiple options for the senior center, including a new home in renovated space equivalent to the current operation and/or contracting with a local community organization to provide those services to our most important residents. Under either scenario, transportation services will be provided to our frail elderly seniors. It's contemplated that the Board of Health will be relocated to the east wing of Hartley Dodge once the historic renovation of that space has been completed. This is a work in progress, but extremely important to get right. And during this interim period, the staff of the Board of Health will continue to maintain all essential medical services required to deal with this pandemic. And that's basically where we are, Mayor, and I'm available if there are any questions.
Thank you. And to just reaffirm what you just said, this does not change the borough's commitment to senior programs. The pandemic has kind of shut things down temporarily, has given us an opportunity to look at how we deliver things. John Hoover was liaison to the Senior Citizen Advisory Committee, is working on they're working on a survey to find out what sort of programs and how we can best deliver. So we are committed to this, to continue the senior programs in probably even a better manner. And again, as you mentioned, the health department was in the Hartley Dodge at one point, so it's just a matter of they're coming home again. And so we can continue to deliver those services. Any questions or comments from council on this topic? Okay. We are now moving on to public comment, and I will, we have a lot of attendees, a lot more than we get at a normal council meeting. So let me go through the guidelines with this, and so you understand how the process will go. As I open it up to the public, it's a opportunity to ask questions and make comments on this topic. The way you'll do it, if you were online, you'll see a little hand that you can click on, and then we will call you up as we see the hand. If you have called in, just hit *9 and that will raise a hand for you. Note that for security reasons, and I don't see anyone right now, but if anyone has does not have a name listed or a phone number listed, we cannot recognize you. But once you are recognized and unmuted, you must state your name and address as the first things you're saying before any comments. Your failure to do so may result in you being muted or disconnected, because that's for security reasons. Try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, but we do give a 1 minute grace period consistent with our council meetings. And so at 4 minutes, you will be stopped. And so it's not to take away from your time, and to also allow for continuity. We'll capture the questions during the comment period and answer those after the comments period has been closed. All right. So with that, anyone wishing to comment, again, please click on the hand or hit *9. All right. Keisha Moore, we will bring you up first.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Keisha Moore. I live at 10 Ridgedale Avenue, apartment 19. And I just want to say that I am so proud of the work that Madison has already done around affordable housing, and just wanted to lend my support and also some suggestions for how we might be able to do it even better. So I've been a member of a group, MARE, it's Madison Alliance for Racial and Ethnic Equity, which has recently formed in Madison, and housing is one of our core goals. We want to make sure that Madison is as diverse and inclusive as possible, and that housing is a key component of that. And given what the two participants said earlier today, we could see how important housing is for stabilizing families, not just those families, but their children. So it has an intergenerational component. And so for all of those issues around justice and equity moving forward, we are in full support of affordable housing. And so that's my kudos to you. My questions are really about extending the affordable housing to the very low income and extremely low income areas. So under 30% or 30 to 50%, because again, in terms of equity, these are the populations that have the widest gap between what they can afford and what is available. And these are the populations that are paying more than 50% of their income for housing. And so ways that we could be a part of creating more housing stock for this population would be really important. And especially in the extremely low income, a large portion of that group is seniors, which we already do a great job of providing housing for, but another large portion of that are people with disabilities. And so especially given our plan to have the housing built around transportation nodes, which is a great strategy that actually makes it more accessible for people who are living with a disability to be able to live and work and kind of have access to transportation. So for that population in particular, those locations would work out really well for them. And yeah, my last comment is just, if it is possible for us to move some of those numbers to a lower available housing stock, and if not, why not? So thank you.
Thank you very much, Keisha, and able to capture those questions. And I have Susan address that after the comment period. And now Lisa Jordan.
Hello,
Yes.
I'm Lisa Jordan, 36B Lawanica Way. Also a member of the Madison Alliance for Racial and Ethnic Equity, and I'm on the Sustainable Madison Member Advisory Council. So I was a little bit surprised that the hearing did not begin with acknowledgement of past discrimination, racism, and prejudice, which produce harmful residential segregation in our state and that persists today. My understanding is that the Fair Share Housing Settlement means that the state of New Jersey is requiring that we begin to take part in dismantling systemic racism by beginning to open our neighborhoods and communities to newcomers who have been deeply wounded by centuries of violent oppression. So from my perspective, then we shouldn't ask Dion and Yeshi to give thanks to Madison. We should ask them here so we can listen to them for ideas for how we move forward through truth, through reconciliation, apology, possibly reparations. And I think it's important that people in Madison understand this is fundamentally about systemic racism and how we dismantle it. So my questions for the council and for the mayor and for the planners, why are you not talking about racism and like the purpose and meaning of the settlement? I don't understand the reason for couching this language from hiding, what this is actually about. And I think it makes it harder for us to understand and move forward, to really think about, what would be best for people who need affordable housing. And why did Madison take so long? And why be so stingy? Can we be more generous?
Thank you, Lisa. And before I go to the next speaker, I just we captured that, and we will not have time to address it right now. As far as, but I know Susan does quite a presentation on on what you're alluding to, Lisa, including the redlining, the lending practices that happened for decades that put those of color at a disadvantage. So thank you for your comments. Our next commenter, I think, Chris Kellogg, I'm thinking. So please, you'll be unmuted and state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Chris Kellogg, 3 Walnut Street. I have three things. One is just to congratulate the team. It was really a wonderful presentation that I saw tonight from Susan, much more than I remember seeing 5 years ago. So you get a good sense of the overall strategies that are going into the borough's response to this need. The second item I want to speak to is the need for the circulation within the site to not dump out onto Walnut Street. The borough approved the development of 8 units at the Romano site. So you take the 30, they're now contemplated at the Civic Center site. You've got 38 units, virtually the same number you had 5 years ago. And certainly one of the big concerns that many residents had was the just overwhelming amount of vehicular traffic coming onto Walnut when the street is essentially locked down twice a day. So that can be solved through a connection. Mayor and I spoke about this briefly a week or so ago, through the Civic Center site over to the site on Community Place that we're contemplating 14 units on former school property. So it would be absolutely irresponsible and moronic not to provide that connection, at least in the planning of the layout. I know it might need additional property that would be in an easement or what from the school board in order to be able to go between the Community Place site, 14 units, and the 30 units at Civic Center. But it should be one way in from Walnut, exiting out at Community Place. And then lastly, I want to speak to the issue of energy and green building. There's a lot of greenwashing out there. Simply saying we're going to do a LEED building doesn't really provide a very high level quality of energy sustainability. LEED is a broad system of standards, whereas another system called Passive House would be a highly appropriate standard to look to for this development, because as many of us know, the lower income that is the threshold for getting into these units, their house financial planning is much larger. A much larger component of it is for utility cost. So with the Passive House system, you can bring your utility costs down substantially, 2 to 3 times better than a LEED certified house. And the Passive House system should not cost a huge amount more. There's ample studies and evidence of market competitive Passive House construction.
1 minute, Chris.
So, okay, one minute. Okay. Well, that about sums it up. I have those 3 points that I wanted to make, and I look forward to hearing everybody else's comments and questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. And we'll just capture 2 quick things right now. As we discussed, yeah, we really want to look at we need to look at the circulation to minimize with any neighborhood the traffic impact. And the advantage of Susan talked about the redevelopment program and being able to bring in a developer with that experience in green building certainly is on our list. So thank you for those comments. And now Lola Spot.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Lois Bott and I am at 117 Green Avenue. Full disclosure, I am Commissioner and Chair of the Madison Housing Authority. However, tonight I speak as a private citizen who's been paying attention to the council's reporting of their negotiations with Fair Share Housing Corporation. And first, thank you to the mayor, the council, and the professionals for all the work you've done on this. I know it's been a tremendous amount of work that's gone into this over the last 5 years. I must say that I am proud of Madison's affordable housing, and especially the fact that our family and single family units are scattered sites. And I wish that we could continue to build scattered sites that integrate seamlessly into our community to fill our fair share obligation. However, after 5 years of negotiation, the court has decided, and we are required to build 40 units in this settlement, and that site needs to be determined by December 1st. Under these circumstances, I fully agree with the council's decision to move forward with the property on Walnut and Community Place, which the borough already owns. It makes the most sense. And of course, we want to avoid the builder's remedy, which Dr. Blickstein told us about, that could have dire consequences for our community. And she spoke directly about what happened in Cranford. So I think we should all be aware of that. In closing, I just want to say, let's not be afraid of what Madison's going to look like with more affordable housing. Let's remember that our new neighbors in affordable housing will be like Deanne and Yeshi, and those who we heard from at the beginning of the meeting, who've worked hard to build their own dreams and have become an integral part of the Madison community. So let us welcome our new neighbors as we move forward with this new project. So thank you again to the mayor, the council, and Dr. Blickstein.
Thank you, Lois. And now, Vic, and as you come on, please state your full name and address.
Good evening. I'm Vic Schumacher. I live at 163 Central Avenue. And in the interest of full disclosure, I'm the president of the board of the adult school. I'd like to commend all of you for the excellent job, especially bringing the human factor into this cold, court-ordered, laborious report. It made it much more real. It will help keep it real. On slide number 22, there was the statement that the borough would help to relocate the senior center and the Board of Health. The adult school was left out. Years ago, when the Green Village Road School was closed, we were homeless. Now it seems we're going to be homeless again. I'm hoping that the board or the greater Madison community will give some thought to that, because we do offer 300 plus courses. We've been in existence since the Great Depression, and we are going to be homeless unless we find a new home. If anyone has any great ideas, I would love to hear them. And again, thank you to all of you. This was a very, very valid, well thought out, comprehensive report.
Thank you, Vic. And for full disclosure, I'm a former chair of the adult school board, so I am very aware of the great work that you've been doing for many decades and the importance of our community. So yes, and I think you got your public service announcement in there, so we'll get the word out that we need to find you a home. Next, Eric Range. Still muted there, Eric.
How about now? How's that?
There we go.
Better. My name is Eric Range, Bellow Avenue in Madison. As most of you know, I serve on both the Downtown Development Commission and I'm the president of the Board of Health. I'd like to just add my voice to endorse the plan for these affordable units at the Civic Center and the Community Place parcels. As Susan noted, having these units near the core of downtown is beneficial not only for the residents who will be near all those resources of downtown, but in close proximity to elementary schools, the junior school, and the high school, all within walking distance. But it's also a great benefit for our merchants and our restaurateurs downtown, who will have those additional residential units and therefore customers, which was, as we all know, noted in the Urbanomics Downtown Revitalization Study that was commissioned by the Borough and the DDC several years ago. As far as the impact on the health department, I think it gives us a really unique opportunity to renovate and reimagine a new space for the needs of a modern 21st century health department, which is something we're all learning in 2020, what that needs to look like. And I look forward to working in the coming years with the department staff and the borough administration on just such a project. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have listed as Madison. So again, please first thing state your full name and address as you come on board.
Hi, Madison Smith, 2 Walnut Street. Hey, I just want to commend everyone for their presentations. And can you hear me? I'm sorry.
You're coming through loud and clear.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to commend everyone for their effort here. I think we're losing a lot of some of the main issues that are really affecting those that live in this area, right? So the issue is not about whether affordable housing belongs in Madison. Of course it does. Personally, I've been a recipient and a beneficiary of affordable housing, and I've been living now in Madison for over 20 years. Very happy that I had that experience. So that's not really the issue, right? The real issue is the placement of these units. And as I think Clark had alluded to, as an area, we successfully negotiated with the contractor for those 8 units on Walnut Street. And I believe they started out as 14 or maybe even more, went down to 8, and the plan went relatively well. So it's, again, it's not about the fact that we're having affordable housing. As a matter of fact, I'll argue in this area, if those 30 units were multi-million-dollar units that would actually raise property values in this area, it would still be a bad idea. That street is a one-way street, twice a day. It's already a place where cars avoid going on Main Street and to get through the town. It's already busy. It's already dangerous because of the amount of cars traveling on that street and the speeds that they're going. So to add 30 more units would be reckless. Okay, so that's the first thing. From a safety perspective and from a quality of life perspective in this area would go down dramatically. The second thing, and I know you've had some people on that have expressed the interest of the minority community. I'd like to know why it is that in this racially diverse neighborhood in this area that we live in, you have decided to try to shoehorn more units of any price in this area, when the areas that are primarily populated by white people, okay, white folks, that area like Triangle Park and other areas, what we call on the other side of the tracks, is never a consideration. All of you on the council, if you were there, and the mayor, if you were there, when that gigantic complex over by the old Green Village school was being built, you all had an opportunity to have these affordable housing units placed in there, and somehow that slipped through the cracks. Now you're going to try to take 30 units, again, way too many units, again, no matter what the price is, and you're going to shoehorn in an area that has a significant amount of Black and brown residents. That inequity seems to never be addressed, especially by the council. You all think it's a wonderful idea, but how come it's never a wonderful idea on the other side of the tracks? So here's my questions. What did happen? Why didn't we get any affordable housing units in that giant structure on Green Village Road? Why not build right on the Woodland Road, the Triangle Park right on Woodland Road? What about the Madison Ambulance building and parking lot? Why not build on there? And why can't you take that existing area, which, by the way, I believe has, speaking of the Civic Center on Walnut Street, has been specifically neglected because all along you felt like this would be a great place to drop these unnecessary units. And it's not unnecessary because it's unnecessary to have affordable housing. Again, it's wonderful to have affordable housing. It's unnecessary to burden the people in this area with 30 more units of any dollar value. So that's really my question to you. And finally, why
So
would we get,
your time is up. So just finish that quick phrase.
yeah, just finally.
Sorry, we lost you to the hard stop. We will, in our follow-up after our comment period, we'll talk about why this location, why there was not inclusionary housing at Rhodes Hall, and why parks were not considered. So we will address those. And now Claire Whitcomb.
Claire Whitcomb, at 12 Fairwood Road. I am Chair of the Environmental Commission, and I just wanted to commend everyone for a really excellent presentation. And so many of the comments have been extremely thoughtful. And I want to piggyback on what Keisha Moore and Chris Kellogg said. And I also think that a passive house standard would be excellent for this project. 66% of Madison's carbon footprint comes from the built environment. So it's really great that we have this opportunity to work with a redeveloper to really do something that could be a real climate leader. And the other thing that's really good about the passive house standard is that it reduces energy costs for residents from 70 to 90% lower. And it also provides fresh filtered air that's free of outside pollutants and allergens. So it's kind of a good COVID thing to think about. And I really look forward to the leadership in the council and the mayor and all the sort of environmental advocates in town to see what we can craft to have a really excellent building with that reflects both environmental and social justice. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Claire. And we look forward to getting the input from the Environmental Commission. So as we work with the developer to put together a great project. And Tom Howard, Plutus.
Okay, Mayor, thanks very much. Hello, Mayor and Council. Tom Harlan Putis from 27 Pomeroy Road. I'm not sure if Susan touched on the change in the Fair Share Housing Corporation's original requirement for us of almost 1,000 units and how we got it reduced to 40, which is fantastic. And 40 is probably more appropriate for the borough. Like you said, we already have so many affordable housing units in town. And full disclosure, I'm also on a Madison Housing Corporation, which is now called HQM. So I've been participating and watching how the borough has been trying to make Madison accessible for lower income families. I was wondering, Mayor, which board would actually take care of the redevelopment plan? Would it be the planning board or zoning board? And a piggyback question on that is, would they be doing a redevelopment plan just for a community place? Or would it also be for the Walnut Street property? It would probably be beneficial for everybody to see what the proposal would really look like to put 30 units of housing in there or 20 units of housing or whatever would ultimately work without having a huge impact on that specific neighborhood. And I think it was Mr. Schumacher, no, somebody else suggested that definitely you should have an exit and entrance off of Community Place. Another question is, will there be a requirement by other developers in the borough who develop multi-unit housing to also add an affordable housing unit for every 5 units that they build? Yeah, and other than that, I'm glad that the borough is continuing to focus on this. I think it's made Madison a nice, diverse town and offered a lot of people the opportunity to get their start living in town and hopefully improve their quality of life and have their children educated in our school system as well. I know it takes a lot of effort and that the council spent a lot of time working on this, and we have had a great history of offering affordable housing to the community, like you said, for the last 50 years, which is very unique in the area compared to what the surrounding towns have done. So at least people can understand a little better that Madison has put a lot of effort into that compared to the surrounding communities. Thanks again for letting me talk, Mayor, and thanks to everybody on the council and to you too, Ray, for your presentation on where the senior center is going to be moving or what you'll do with it eventually.
Thank you, Tom. And just, I think we can handle those very quickly. It's a planning board for the redevelopment, and it's redevelopment on the half acre because there's already a redevelopment plan for the Civic Center site. So it's only, and that's the resolution that will be voted on at the end of this meeting. So planning board is in charge of that. And now on to Danielle.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, it's Danielle Sauer, 35 Ridgedale. How are you guys? Wanted to thank you guys. This was actually a really good, informative presentation. Couple things that I kind of realized throughout this, and I know you guys made a big point of stressing that there were units kind of scattered throughout the borough. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, but I think you said something like 86 were scattered kind of throughout the borough already. Is that the right number? I think it's
about, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So with the inclusion of these and the 14, that will make 75 units on this block. That's almost exactly, the matching number throughout the town on this one block. And, I am all for affordable housing, and I agree with Deb. You can't tell one from another, and that's great. But I have always been about density, and I think that is an exorbitant amount on one block. And I would love to know if that was taken into consideration on this and what the impact on, again, on traffic studies and on the schools, given that there are other areas, and given I think the town through the Kushner property at Rose Hill, I think there was like $2 million that was supposed to be put towards the purchase of properties for low-income housing, that it just always comes back to this block, always. And I find that very distressing, to be honest with you. I have no doubt that they'll look great. That's not my issue. My issue has always been and has been density. And it's there will be an equal amount on this block as there is scattered throughout the rest of the town. And I just don't think that that's I don't think it's fair. I really don't. And that's all I got to say. So.
Thank you, Danielle. We've had the questions before about the location, so we'll address some of your concerns and questions when we get to that. Now, Brad Hanson.
Mayor Conley, can you hear me?
You're a little muffled, but
all right. Can you hear me better now?
That's a little bit better.
All right. Brad Hanson, 15 Walnut Street. Right off the bat, I really want to thank Ms. Matiku and Ms. James. They did a great job of telling their story, giving that compelling argument for affordable housing for everyone. And I'm all for affordable housing in Madison. But I want to echo what Madison said and also what Danielle just went over. It's very, very dense in this area. I think living right across the street from Central Avenue School, we see every day the number of cars, and we realize the density is such that having 30 units in a small acreage like that, I don't even know what the acreage was. I noticed that Community Place was 0.56, but I'd like to know what the acreage is for the community center or civic center. But the idea is it's extremely dense, and all of those issues that we talked about 5 years ago when we had this large meeting at the town hall where 100 people showed up and voiced their concern, that it just seems like we're doing it over again. And I just don't like the idea that we're rehashing. And I know that 5 years is a long time, but it just seems like we could have had better options to try not to densify so much in this area. So I'm disappointed by that. I think also the idea is, what are we going to do with Central Avenue School? If we're going to put 30 units in there, Do we have plans? I know this is not the Board of Education meeting. Maybe I'll join tomorrow. But the idea is, what are we going to do to upgrade our schools to allow for that many people to come in? You know, and I think that's one thing that I've always been concerned about. But you know, I'm a little concerned. You know, right now our class size is 23 for Central Avenue School, and can it always get bigger? Maybe a little bit, but that's too much. So, you know, I'm disappointed, you know, that we're rehashing this again, but I understand that we just don't have a lot of space in Madison, and you'll go over that after all of our discussion. But I'm against it for the simple reason that it's in the same location 5 years ago, and we're just not being very innovative, at least, you know, in a high level from my end. So that's all I have. Thanks for the time. Thanks for Sue Blinkenstein for putting this together, the presentation. She always does a great job of explaining it. You know, unfortunately, I think a lot of people on Walnut Street know her really well, and we wish we didn't have to, but thank you for the opportunity to learn a little bit more.
Thank you, Brad. And now Joanna Bertensky.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. So
Oh,
go
okay.
ahead and state your name and address, and then you can start your comments.
Hi, everyone. This is Joanna Ortinska. I live at 43 Richdale Avenue. And I do want to kind of, first off, thank everyone for the presentation. It was really informative, so really appreciate it. And I really also did appreciate the comments and kind of the humanizing of this issue. I think that to echo a lot of the statements that were already made from Danielle, from Madison, from Brad, I am not against affordable housing. I think that it is important to have a nice, diverse community, but I think that the impacts of having that many units located in an already dense area with the 8 additional units that literally just went up this summer, I am really concerned about things like parking, things like traffic that have already been mentioned. I mean, adding so many cars where our kids are literally walking to school doesn't really seem like necessarily the best idea. And also the impact of the schooling. I mean, a lot of the people who would be moving in, I'm assuming, are going to have kids. And how are we thinking through all the different impacts that this is going to have on our community? And is there a way to essentially spread this out a little bit more? So that way it's not literally concentrated all in one block, but maybe it's spread out a little bit more throughout the community. Thank you for the attention. I look forward to more of a conversation around this.
Thank you, Joanna. And now Carrie Reyes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, Mayor. I want to thank the entire council.
Just state your name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forget.
That's all right.
I'm Carrie Reyes. I live at 26 Community Place. And full disclosure, I am the assistant, the deputy municipal clerk. But I am speaking as a private resident at the moment. I have been blessed to live in the public housing, affordable housing units, first at John Avenue and now at Community Place. I just recently transferred. I know that a lot of people are very upset about the area, but speaking for someone who doesn't have a car, the transfer has been life-changing. Just being in the center of town and being able to grocery shop and just run errands without being like a mile and a half from the center of town has really transformed my everyday life. So I would like some people to understand that. I know that you've given up a lot. Madison does an incredible job of diversity. Personally, I've lived here for 20 years. And in the past 20 years, I have seen this administration, the council, and the residents embrace diversity like no other town around this area. If you look at other areas like Chatham and Summit and Whippany, they're not as diverse as Madison, and this is one of the most beautiful things I think I love about this town. I just want to state that the importance of the location is beyond. I understand that there are problems with the schools and with traffic, but for many affordable housing recipients, when they first move to suburbia, or if they're moving from another area, they don't always have transportation. And the location is pivotal to having a good quality of life. And I can only say that from my own personal experience. Thank you very much for your presentation, and I really hope that these units will be put in the community place area. Thank you.
Carrie and Deborah Hess.
Deborah Hess, 31 Ridgedale Avenue. Hello, I have lived here for 40 years. It doesn't seem possible. And I have loved every minute of it. I would like to comment on the density. I too am in favor of affordable housing, have written books on the subject, on Caribbean and African and North African literature. But I think that the numbers are just going through the roof. To my right, 20 units have replaced 7 houses, the condos, Mr. Romano's condos. Then 2 additional buildings were converted into 8 units. And for each one, there was additional parking and an extension of the buildings. Then we have the 16 affordable housing units that abut the bottom of my property. And they were very well designed and conceived. But once again, the parking was not taken into account. There was no visual barrier. And then to propose an additional 44 units seems excessive. One question I had was, it seems to me that the Civic Center must occupy 1/4 of an acre. So how is it possible to put 30 units there? It just seems mathematically impossible. Why not reverse, for example, reverse the 2 places, put 14 units there, and then 30 units on Community Place? Wouldn't that work out better? But once again, it seems as though this square block of the history, the history road, which is now Madison Avenue, has been designated the most condensed part of Madison. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Thank everyone for joining us and listening to comments. We'll now answer some of these questions and have further discussion. So I'll close this part of the meeting. First one for Susan. If you can talk a little bit about how the income levels and the ratio of the different income levels are decided.
Under the requirements, 13% of the units have to be affordable to those earning 30 to 40% of the median housing income. So there will be units allocated to very low income households. The comment about people with disabilities, one option, the borough, I think that was a good point, that this housing, which will be built to contemporary standards, may be appropriate for people with disabilities in ways that older housing may not be. So that, I think, was a very, very helpful comment. I do want to just commend, Keisha and Lisa. I think they, justice and equity are incredibly important issues. My presentation that I was asked to give is specific to the settlement agreement and the strategies that the borough has put into place. but you raise very important and timely issues. And I do want to reiterate or iterate that the reason the borough and every other community in New Jersey is in litigation over this is because it is a constitutional obligation under the state law. I mean, that is sort of the roots of all of this. I was asked to spare you all some of the roots and some of the long-windedness of prior presentations, but I absolutely value and appreciate the comments. I don't know, Mayor, if you want me to keep addressing comments or you want to direct me.
I'll go through and then you can,
Thank you.
I may punt to you or you can jump in. And I just want to reinforce what you just said. Susan had done a presentation to the planning board about the history behind racism in housing, and it was very enlightening, and certainly this country has a lot of work to do to recover from that. Some of the things we talked about already, the circulation traffic, as that moves forward, we will certainly be very mindful, and the concept of doing what we can to shift the traffic burden off of Walnut is a challenge we will accept. There was a lot of comments and about why this location, and we certainly understand that no matter where this location, no matter where we pick, that the people, no matter how you feel about affordable housing, are concerned about what it is truly in your backyard. And the location is where we've had conversations. It is a denser part of town, but it's, as Susan noted, some of the advantages to this location of being adjacent to the downtown by nature becomes a denser part of the community. We did look at other locations. As you know, we had the MRC as our first choice, and that was deemed not possible because of the state at the 11th hour asserting jurisdiction on that property, and we would never be able to even be successful, not do it in a timely manner. It was also, Susan had her presentation, we actually had an offer to a property owner in town, in a different part of town. The offer was based on a full appraisal. We then paid this entity to do their own appraisal with their own appraisers, and so it was a very valid offer that was made. They chose at this time not to proceed with a sale. And again, the timeliness, we would not be able to keep that alive. The questions which come up often, how come there were no inclusionary affordable units in Rose Hall when that was built? And that was it was at a different time when there was no, COA was in limbo, there was no true guidance, though we knew the possibility that it would generate a requirement to do affordable housing. But we left it in the choice of the Board of Education, and they either inclusionary or to take it off-site and to give us a half acre of land at the Central Avenue School, hence the 14 units there. By doing that, they were able to maximize the value of the Green Village Road school property and invest $12 million back into our schools. The developer paid into our affordable trust, which is money we will be using to help develop this site. And the Board of Education did just recently pass that half acre onto us for the 14 units. It is deed restricted to only 14 units. And so putting more on the community place site is not possible. There is also the comment about why not parks? Why not the triangle at the Woodland and Richard Niles Park and other places? And that falls in the same category as the MRC. It is part of our ROSI, our registration of open space inventory, or something like that. So we would not be able, just as we couldn't do on the MRC, we are not able to build on any existing parks. And the parking lots in downtown also pose another challenge. So that's how we ended up back at Walnut. As was pointed out, it is advantageous to the tax credit program and a location for affordable housing, especially those without transportation. But we recognize that this is a burden on the neighborhood, and that's how we have to continue to work to minimize that burden. School, the MRC site and this site would have both been Central Avenue School District. I had a conversation with the school district recently. One of the things they are doing, instead of redistricting schools, if a school is filled at this point, families are assigned to a different school. I had a call from someone that was a couple of blocks from Torrey J and had been assigned to Kings Road School because of space. And so the school district is taking a proactive approach to making sure the schools are balanced. We also have some background, don't have it available right now, as far as the number of children that might be generated by this project. And so we will share that. The acreage of the Civic Center, Susan, you got that one?
So the Civic Center is 1.57 acres. It is larger than people realize because the land continues deeper than people may be aware of if you just view it from Walnut. So it is 3 times the size of the property that the borough acquired from the Board of Education.
And which actually pretty much puts it at base same ratio as far as units per acre. Susan or others that the questions that I might not have caught? Susan, go ahead.
I do want to indicate or at least emphasize that when thinking about quality of life, it's important to think about quality of life of future residents as well. And being in a location that is not car dependent is important not only for residents, but it will also minimize the impact of the number of trips that would be generated. And I think that comparing it to market rate housing, which is next door, 7 market rate units and 1 affordable unit, may not be the best comparison in that regard. I did want to address some of Mr. Haum-Lapudis's comments. The redevelopment plan actually requires both boards to participate in that process without going in lots of detail. That's the short version. I do think that even though the Civic Center property has a current redevelopment plan in place, that I am sure that the borough's approach in collaborating with the developer will be to show concepts for both properties. And also in response to his comment, there is a borough-wide inclusionary housing requirement already in place. And so as new units are constructed, whether they're within these optional overlay areas or other locations, any project with 5 or more units at a density of at least 6 units per acre will be required to dedicate 20% of all units as affordable units. So I think that that is also an important issue. Let me just make sure that there's anything else that I think that those are the additional things I wanted to add.
Thank you. And thank you for remembering the inclusionary zone. I forgot to capture that. Kate Ransom-Silman, I see you have your hand up. We have already closed the public comment, so I apologize that I cannot reopen it at this point. So but please email your comments and they can be shared with the council. Any other comments or questions from the council? All right, then we will go on to the redevelopment resolution. Everyone should have received the latest version of it. I think the title itself gives enough explanation as to the full resolutions. I will read the resolution by title and ask for a motion in a second. Resolution 284-2020, resolution authorizing the planning board of the Borough of Madison to undertake preliminary investigation to determine if certain real estate property within the Borough of Madison is in the area of need of redevelopment, and if the determination is made that the property is an area of need of redevelopment, directing the planning board to prepare a redevelopment plan for the designated development area. And this was a ballot question on the in November. There would have been explanation. So basically, this is for the half-acre lot that was transferred from the Board of Education to the borough. As mentioned by Susan, we already have the redevelopment plan for the Civic Center lot. So it's lot 1601 or block 1601, lot 1, lot 1.01. The reason it's two parts is the first, the investigation is done by the planning board, and if it is determined to be a site for redevelopment, the actual plan is put in place. And may I have a motion for that?
Mayor, I'll move resolution 284-2020.
Second.
Any council discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Bailey?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Cohen?
Yes.
Ehrlich?
Yes.
All right, this will go to the planning board for their meeting tomorrow night. And with that, I need a motion for adjournment.
Mayor, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all, the public that joined us tonight, and appreciate, and we will be working very hard to make this a quality project for the Borough of Madison. Be well.
Thank you. Good night.